The nation is still seeing low employment numbers, and many businesses are finding it difficult to hire people. So they're compelled to develop new ways to attract and retain people. Some companies are figuring out whether a 4-day work week is a realistic way to navigate the situation, as the research shows that it could actually benefit employees and employers alike. My next guest is the assistant professor of organizational behavior at the Gabelli School of Business at Fordham University, Dr. Sophia Town. And she says a 4-day work week is possible. And we're going to talk about that right now. Dr. Town, good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Darren. Really appreciate being on here today.
No, I really appreciate the conversation. And I think when we talk about having a 4-day work week, most Americans say, listen, I'm working too much already. But there is some research to be able to say potentially a 4-day work week could be at both an employer's advantage and the employee's advantage. But how did you come to this realization?
Well, this question is really part of a larger conversation around human flourishing right now in the workplace. And we've seen kind of after the disruption of the pandemic that we all went through, this paradigm shift or a start of a paradigm shift about what it means to be productive, what it means to have a balanced life that involves work and extra, outside of work activities, and what it means to be a whole person in the workplace. And so employees or even like our students, I'm a professor, our students who are graduating from our business schools, they're really coming to their new jobs with a demand to be seen as a whole person at work. And that involves having a life outside of work.
And having a life outside of work means that work would be in its place, and at the same time, enough time for all the other things that life brings about: family, travel, just relaxation. And so it really would be taking a 40-hour work week traditionally and bring it down to a 32-hour work week. Now, when you run this by companies, what are they saying about this? Because to a certain extent, I'm already suffering with with lack of employees and sometimes even lack of esteem amongst my employees. Taking them down to 32 weeks, a company saying, "How's this benefiting me?"
That is a great question. So that's something that question has caused a bit of inertia for companies to make the switch and pivot. But really, what the research is starting to show, which is really exciting for us, is that you can have a both and. It's not necessarily an either or. In fact, when employees are less burned out, they're less stressed out, they have less healthcare costs related to workplace stressors, they actually are more productive, more creative, and more engaged at work. And so when we talk about why this is helpful for businesses, one of the main reasons is that when our employees show up less stressed out, less burned out, and more engaged, we have lower turnover costs, lower healthcare costs, and companies know that both of those things are incredibly expensive. It's also more expensive to replace employees oftentimes than to retain them. So there is a business case for employee well-being, definitely. It's just we've been in this current model for so long, and to shift the paradigm is really, really challenging. However, one of the kind of outcomes, potential silver lining outcomes of the recent disruption we all have been through with the pandemic, is that companies were forced to try on a new model. And anytime we're forced to try on a new model, we're kind of demanded to get creative, and we are seeing some potential positive outcomes of that creativity, which is that shorter work weeks don't necessarily equate to less productivity.
Yeah, but as we talk about shorter work weeks, there's also the question about salary and pay. Would a person's salary and pay be affected under a shorter work week?
That is a great question. So the primary research so far on this topic has shortened the work week without decreasing the pay to see if employees are as productive if they work less and are paid the same amount. Because if we pay them less, then they're going to be less motivated, right, to work. So this particular model will work for salaried employees. It's important to keep in mind that not every employee is a salaried employee. So when we're looking at employees who work for an hourly wage, we have to get creative and think about different ways to make this work. There is some research that is exploring company or employees who are hourly employees working potentially longer days, but 4-hour days. So 10-hour work days, 4 days a week, and exploring what that possibility looks like. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think we need to get a little creative with it.
And you've also had companies already do the experiment for full-time salaried employees too. So what was the experience? What were the results that we found from companies that actually participated in the survey with regards to this particular practice?
Well, in the largest scale survey on this particular question, or largest scale study on this particular question, we found what I mentioned earlier, that both and we found that employees were actually continuing to do just excellent work and doing more, or being more productive and contributing more to their organizations than prior to this shift. So we have happier employees who are more productive. I mean, really, what more could we want?
Yeah. And so there is a push to actually have a 4-day work week, and legislation has actually gone forth. Where are we right now? And talked about that process.
Well, right now we're in the middle of a lot of conversations involving differing opinions, and that is a beautiful place to be, because that's where we can surface diverse perspectives and bring those perspectives to the fore. So right now we're looking at potential policy shifts, but those conversations are still unfolding. Um, One thing that I wanted to mention is that there's also a conversation about worker shortages at the moment. And one thing that I would like to see us kind of look at and explore as this conversation unfolds is, to what degree are shortages, pardon me, related to things like compassion fatigue, right? So we're seeing a lot of this in healthcare, law enforcement, and other types of organizations like that, where people are very burnt out based on kind of the emotional vibrancy of their role. And so I'd like the conversations to kind of look at that compassion fatigue and things of that nature, because burnout plays a huge role in how this all works.
And burnout is huge. And when you think about so many people who quit their jobs, resign, but I think you also speak about health issues, right? Because there is an advantage for people in the area of stress, in the area of hypertension, all of those things that are tied to sometimes working this many hours. So have you gotten any endorsements from the health field about this?
Oh my goodness, absolutely, absolutely. There is Jeff Pfeffer wrote this book called "Dying for a Paycheck." I recommend people check it out. It's a really beautiful overview of kind of how this all works. But basically, this is the idea that we are most chronic illness, and I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a PhD, so fact check me on this. But a lot of chronic illness is related to stress. This is the idea, and stress oftentimes comes from work. We spend most of our time, our waking hours, at work. And so when we're stressed out, we are more likely to develop chronic illness, is the idea. And then our employers are going to have to pay for that in the form of, elevated healthcare costs, um, time off because of illness, not necessarily directly related to work. Like, you think of like um, it's not necessarily directly related to like dangerous working conditions, but the chronic illness and fatigue that we have because of our stress is really putting pressure on the employees, on the organizations, on our communities and families. I mean, the ripple out effect is pretty phenomenal. So
Yeah. Well, Dr. Sophia
yeah.
Town, I want you to know we'll continue to follow this. If we can get this passed, I think there'll be a lot of happy Americans. I know that people in the UK are also looking at this too, but it's definitely something that I think we can do, especially coming out after COVID. We find new innovative ways to do things. We can make a 4-day work week. I don't know if that work here at the TV station, but we can definitely continue to see it for more Americans out there. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
All righty, listen, for more information, you can visit our website at drsophiatown.com. We encourage you, don't go anywhere. We've got more open coming up right after this.